Ulric Stone woke to the faint ticking of his pocket watch. It shouldn't tick. The glass was cracked. The hands had been stuck at 11:47 for years. But in dreams, it always found a heartbeat. That was his anchor. When the watch ticked, he wasn't awake. He got his bearings. The air smelled like dry rushes and oil. Light shivered on stone. When his eyes adjusted, a hall emerged around him. Pillars, shelves, ladders, walkways. Slender scrolls were banded in leather, stacked in niches like ribs. He didn't need a guidebook to name it. The Library of Alexandria. He had pictured this place since he was 12. He had traced floor plans in margins, memorized the names of vanished custodians, argued in classrooms about which wings burned and which were rumors. But all of that was theory. This was the shock of stone under his hand, the bite of lamp smoke, the weight of centuries humming in wood. US lifted the watch. 11:47, fixed as always. He ran his thumb over the dent near the hinge, then tucked it into his palm. He didn't need to ask why he was here. Dreams never showed him cartoons or anxiety about missed trains. They always gave him history, at the moment it broke. He walked the central aisle. Cool air slid along the floor, bearing the faintest trace of brine. A librarian would have hated the way he moved. No gloves, no permission, but he didn't touch anything. Not yet. A shadow detached from the stacks and became a woman. Linen draped clean lines over her arms. Coal-framed direct eyes. She hugged a scroll to her chest, the way people hold a child. "Don't run," she said, steady and low. She spoke Greek, but his dream did the translation without effort. "You'll only stir it faster." "Stir what?" US asked. "The fire." He listened. Beneath the lamp hiss, the stone breathed. In that breath he heard it, far off, like weather rolling toward a shore, a low growl. It swelled, broke, split into shouts, and the crack and snap of wood. A tide found a hall. US exhaled. "We're at 48 BC, he said, as much to himself as to her. "Caesar's siege, ships lit, sparks carry inland." "Here," she said, and touched the pillar nearest them. Her hand came away gray with dust. "It begins as rumor. Then memory swallows rumor and makes it true." "You're a memory?" he asked. "A librarian," she said. Then, after a beat, "And yes." "What do I call you?" "Callista." "Callista, I need an exit." "You need a map," Callista said. She lifted the scroll an inch. Codex Somnium, Book of Dreams. When the library was threatened the first time, long before your Caesar, its custodians hid a copy in a chamber beyond the stacks. The codex is a way through layers. In dreams, you don't walk. You align. "Where is it?" "Not on this layer." US didn't swear. He nodded once. Layers. That fit the cold seam of brine in the air, the way the lamp haze looked briefly like mist off a harbor. Sometimes the dream gave you reality stacked like plates. Sometimes it was a tunnel. Sometimes it was a cliff. He started to ask how to descend when the hall changed. Subtly first, like someone had leaned on a wall. Lamps hiccuped. The floor shivered. Dust rose in a long, slow breath. Then the sound arrived all at once. The roar flowered from the far end of the colonnade, the sound of a city catching fire. Heat shouldered the air. Light rolled like a red tide around pillars. Scrolls whispered to each other as they curled, little papyrus tongues blackening at the edges. A ladder toppled and struck stone with a cord that made his teeth ring. Fire can be clumsy. This wasn't. It moved with intent, leaping shelf to shelf, licking ink until it ran like tears. The ceiling groaned. In that groan he heard ships, ropes, men swearing. He smelled pitch. He tasted salt. US closed his hand around the watch. He felt its cool face press his palm. Tick, tick, tick. He let that sound find his bones. Callista did not scream. She pointed. South wing. There's a door that isn't a door. If you can bear water, you can bear what's behind it. Water, he said. So I was right. Only partly, she said, and smiled like someone who had seen it all twice. Try not to drown. They ran. Smoke webbed the aisles. He let his body pick its line like a climber choosing holds. Left of the cracked pillar, right of the cart, duck under the beam. Callista moved with library memory. No wasted steps. Every turn already lived. At the end of the hall, a narrow door waited in a seam of stone. It had no handle. Just a circle carved into it with radiating lines. 8 long, 8 short. A sun. Callista pressed her palm to the circle. The stone drank her touch, then shivered. Water climbed the seam like a vine. In a blink, the hallway wasn't burning. It was flooding. He heard, not with ears exactly, the underwater hush that lives beneath everything loud. Lamps became cold moons. Flame became blue dust. The chamber is below, Callista said. When you see the fish that breathes air, follow it. If you see a man whose shadow burns, don't. The man, US said. He has a name. Callista tilted her head like she was listening to a voice he couldn't hear. Some call him Watcher. Some call him Custodian. He keeps what men aren't allowed to keep. And the fish? She softened. A joke the scribes left for themselves. You'll know it. Chrono point? He asked. The second rule. In dreams, he needed a time marker tied to the waking world to climb back up. Callista tapped his watch. When you hear 3 bells that aren't bells, look for the sun that has no sky. 3 bells, he said. His sleep mask in the waking world gave him a bone-conducted cue 30 minutes before his preset wake time. A triple vibration that became a chime in dreams. Got it. Do you? The smile left her mouth and reached her eyes. Because the bells aren't for you. The door sighed. Water shouldered it open. The world lurched. US stepped through and fell. He didn't fall far. He didn't fall at all, technically. He simply agreed to be where he had been invited to be. Water closed over his head. He opened his eyes. The library was underwater. Stacks climbed into green shadow, like drowned groves. Fish nosed between shelves in tidy schools, unbothered by the idea of authors. Light lay on stone in rippling stripes. Some ladders still leaned neatly against book bays, as if a scribe might glide down any second, brush water from his sleeves, and return to work. US didn't panic. Panic ate air. He bit down the urge to gulp and let dream logic do some of the lifting. In waking life, he could hold his breath 4 minutes on a good day. In here, minutes were opinions. He kicked lightly, moving slow to conserve whatever counted as oxygen, and took stock. The sun carving was on the wall behind him as well. 8 long lines, 8 short. Directly below it, a seam where 2 stones didn't quite meet. He slid fingertips into the gap and felt the scribe's game. Choose the right pattern. The seam would give. A shadow slid across his eye. He looked up. A fish swam above him, silver and long, with gill slits that looked like Roman numerals. When it opened its mouth, he saw a detail that sent a small, involuntary laugh up his nose. A sliver of air compressed in a bubble pocket along its throat, bright as a coin. The fish breathed water, yes, but a thread of air traveled with it, a cartoon of lungs. Found you, he thought. He followed. The fish darted along a chiseled frieze of waves, took a hard left at a toppled bust, then slipped between 2 columns into a lower corridor. US drifted after it, using fingertip touches to push, watching for turbulence that might tangle him in the camber of a collapsed ceiling. 2 shelves ahead, the fish doubled back and circled a panel cut with small round holes, arranged in a pattern that made his scalp buzz. He knew the pattern. He had seen it on an ivory disc in the Louvre, a Greek parapegma, an ancient star calendar you could set with pegs to mark winds and risings. He planted his boots, found purchase, and leaned in. A line of letters flanked the holes. Greek vowels, A, E, I, O, I, O, ran like a scale. Each vowel had a number etched above it, some worn smooth. 7 vowels, 7 tones, 7 pegs. He didn't have pegs, but he had a watch. He held it up. The face caught the green light. 11:47. He could take that as 11 and 47, or 1147, or, in Greek fashion, as letters. The second hand wasn't moving. There was no second hand at all. It had snapped off years ago in Patagonia, on a ledge at dawn. He felt his mind begin to cast possibilities and reeled it in. Dreams rewarded specificity. He pressed 3 fingers, index, middle ring, into 3 of the holes, choosing E, ET, E, iota, and O, omega. 7:124. If he wanted to be cute. But he wasn't being cute. He was thinking in sound. E was a long, open note. I a pin of sound. O a mouth that rounded the world. He hummed, silly underwater, but voice is a pressure wave, and pressure didn't care. He hummed the 3 vowels like tones. The wall answered. A tone shivered back through his bone, almost too low to name. Something gave. The panel rolled a hair's breadth. Silt lifted. The fish flicked its tail, as if pleased with his trick, and vanishing down a slot no thicker than his wrist. The slot widened until it was big enough for a man who didn't mind stone kissing his shoulders. US slid through. The corridor beyond the panel held no shelves. It held time. Time lay there like water, stacked in panes. With each kick, the world tilted a degree, and the library became older, then younger, then an outline. He passed a moment that was all scaffolds and chalk lines on raw stone, then another, where the walls had been painted with tiny birds dancing over reeds. He saw bright figures that didn't use letters yet, and figures that used too many, and a figure that had never been allowed to be drawn. He breathed without thinking. He might not have been breathing at all. Light turned to music, then to the pressure of a hand, then to a smell like rain on dust, after 17 years without it. He felt the watch in his palm as a cold star. The star flickered. The flicker counted inward, marking a clock that hadn't been invented, and would be again. The corridor ended at a low chamber. No fire, no flood, just air that smelled like ink and cumin, and a little bit like sweat. Water ran off him in a blink, leaving him dry as if he had never been wet. A table sat in the center of the room. It had no legs. It was a slab the size of a bed, floated by no visible means. Lines crawled over its surface. Drawings, letters, mechanical dogs, eyes, wave charts, spiral shells. The drawings shifted when he tried to hold them still. On the slab lay a book the color of storm water. It wasn't bound like a codex, not exactly. It had pages, and also didn't. He saw leaves and then a scroll, and then a beating shape that wanted to be a book, but was more honest than that. Codex Somnium, he said aloud. Named after itself, a voice said, mild and dry. How satisfying. US didn't turn. He already knew who stood there. He had seen the silhouette a dozen times, in as many dreams. He had never looked long enough to fix a face. Faces became anchors if you weren't careful. He had learned to watch the edges. The librarian said you were a custodian, he said. I am what keeps, the voice said. What binds. What makes forgetting possible. People like remembering, US said. That is why they require me. US kept his hands open at his sides. I need the codex. You will take part of it even if you don't, the voice said. Objects adhere to thieves. Then let me do it clean. That is not your way. A figure stepped where he could no longer avoid it. He had eyes. Yes. The eyes did not glow. They did not need to. They were the color of coal you could touch without burning, the color of a night sky where you knew the stars were behind the clouds. "What do I pay?" US asked. "There's always a cost." "A memory," the custodian said. "Not a small one. Something you use to call yourself you." US didn't move for a breath. "If I give it, do you return it when I return the codex?" "Men do not return books," the custodian said. "They return versions of books in worse condition." "You may return a version of yourself in worse condition. That is the joke I tell no one." US smiled, humorless. "Try me." The custodian inclined his head, as if the idea entertained him. "Take nothing," the custodian went on. "Look, leave, remember less, or take a page, and I take a day." "A day," US said. "Which day?" "I choose." The room breathed. Far away, faint as 3 thoughts in a row, he heard bells. He looked up fast. "That's early." "It is on time," the custodian said. US felt the watch in his palm as a pulse. The bells weren't bells. They were the little triple vibration from his sleep headset. 30 minutes before his wake time, it sent a cue. Usually that meant he was in the shallows. Not this time. He was deep. The chime had had to tunnel. "Chronopoint," he said. "Thank you." "They weren't meant for you," the custodian said. US moved then, fast. He didn't lunge for the whole codex. He slapped his hand against the low edge and slid his fingers under a page. The page resisted, as if it had ideas about itself. He didn't grab. He eased. He told it a story. "I will bring you to air, and you will be read again." The page loosened a fraction, like breath leaving a stubborn chest. "Careful," the custodian said, almost conversational. "You have very little to spare." "Story of my life," US said, and pulled. The page tore free, cleaner than he'd expected, dirtier than he would have liked. The chamber tilted. The slab shuddered. Drawings rearranged themselves to a pattern that made him want to vomit and sing at the same time. "Payment," the custodian said. He lifted a hand and made a small, precise gesture, as if he were plucking an insect from the air. US felt the loss like a hole punched in the side of a ship. He staggered a step and caught the slab with his free hand. Something he had always held close dropped away. "Which day?" he asked through his teeth. "The day with rain on an iron roof," the custodian said. "Your brother laughing at a game he pretended to hate. Your father's boots on the step. You were 8. US swallowed. Behind his eyes, the shape of the day shrank. He tried to hold it. The custodian did not attack what you threw fists around. He took what you cupped. "You could have taken something larger," US said. "A war, a road, the smell of a country." "The large things are less brave," the custodian said. "They can be rebuilt from maps and stories. Small things carry blood." US slid the page into his jacket. The jacket had no pockets, and then it did. Dream logic wanted to help when you weren't being stupid. He backed toward the corridor. "Run, if you like," the custodian said. "But you are not chased. You are invited." "Not my kind of party," US said. "You will come anyway," the custodian said. "Rome is very bright at night." The bells sounded again, clearer now, like they had moved a room closer. US turned and took the corridor at a controlled sprint. The water didn't come back, but the sense of it did. He hit the star panel with his shoulder, rolled it with more grace than he had any right to, slid through, and let the drowned wing welcome him. The fish waited. It made a small circle, pleased with its work, then arrowed toward a shaft where pale light fell, like a ladder. US kicked for the light. He broke the surface into a hall that wasn't the one he had left. The fire had paused here, as if someone had held up a hand, and the flames obeyed. Smoke shelved in neat layers like varnish. A drift of ash lay ankle-deep and undisturbed, white as frost. The sun carving he had seen before, the circle with 8 long rays and 8 short, glowed faintly on the far wall, but there was no window. The light came from nowhere comprehensible. He listened. No shouting, no ladders falling, just the soft tick of his watch and something under it. A sound like a brush being pulled slowly through hair. Callista stood near the carving, her hands empty now. A smear of ash cut a line along her jaw. She looked like the after-image of herself. "You found it," she said. Not a question. "Part of it," US said. He touched his chest where the page rested against his ribs. It felt neither hot nor cold. It felt like something waiting. Her eyes narrowed. "You paid." He didn't answer. The brush-through hair sound changed and became 3 bell tones, spaced evenly. 1, 2, 3. His headset. The dream translating rhythm to signal. 3 bells, Callista said. "Not for me," he said. He looked at the sun carving. "For the door." "There is no door," she said. "There is if you align." He palmed the watch, hands fixed at 11:47. 8 long rays, 8 short. The carving matched the watch face in spirit, if not in scale. 2 rings of attention. He set the watch against the stone. It stuck like a magnet, though there was no metal to bite. He rotated it until the 12 o'clock mark matched the topmost long ray. 11:47 meant the minute hand just before the hour mark, a hair shy of 12. He set his thumb where the minute would be, aligned to the 3rd short ray, to the left of top. The carving warmed under his skin. The ash on the floor luffed like breath. Light bled from the grooves. The sun on the wall did a thing suns don't do. It turned. Not an illusion. Stone rotated in stone with a hush of ground rock, very old and very sure. As it turned, the room separated into thin sheets. Each sheet drifted an inch, then an inch more, and a corridor settled where a wall had been, as if it had always been there, and had only been waiting for someone to remember how to see it. In the corridor's far distance, a disk hung, bright, absolute, empty of sky around it. A sun that didn't belong to a day. It burned without heat. The bells sounded a 3rd time. The sound cut a perfect hole through the fear. Callista's voice was small. "I told you the bells weren't for you." "They're a countdown," US said. "And a ladder." "To where?" "Up." He looked back at her. "Come." She smiled a tired, beautiful smile that wasn't for him at all. "I am already where I am kept." He nodded. He wanted to say something large and useful, a thank you, a promise. He had learned not to make promises in dreams. The custodian heard them like music and collected them one day, when you were low. US stepped into the corridor. The ash did not take his print. He moved toward the sun without a sky, his watch pulling with a small, polite gravity. The corridor did not lengthen or shorten. It did the opposite of what dream corridors do. It stayed true. When he reached the disk, it was neither flat nor round. It was a door pretending to be a star. He put his hand into light and felt brass. "Chronopoint," he said to no one. "Align, exit." He turned the invisible wheel until the watch in his other hand ticked once. One perfect, surgical tick. And the world fell apart the way good stories fall apart when they are ready to become true again. He woke in the dark of his Boston apartment with the taste of ash at the back of his throat and salt under his nails. He lay still. He had learned to do that. If you sat up too fast, the dream ran off the bed and hid under the dresser and would not come out, even if you spoke soft. He let the room arrive, piece by piece. The hum of the fridge, the quiet push of the heater. Outside, a car moved through a crosswalk puddle. A neighbor coughed 2 stories down. The city was a living animal with a healthy set of lungs. He lifted his right hand. The pocket watch lay there, face cool as coin, hands still glued forever to 11:47. He rolled it, opened the lid, and saw, tucked under the inner rim, where the hinge bit metal, a sliver of something dark. He set the watch on his chest and sat up slow. He turned on the lamp. On the nightstand, beside a glass with a ring of salt dried in a thin, neat halo, he placed the watch and opened the hinge fully. The sliver slid out into his palm. Papyrus. Not a dream the way some dream objects are. Sideways, weightless, allergic to light. This one tolerated the bulb without wincing. Fibers laid against fibers, with the tidy patience of a person who expects a page to outlast a city. Greek letters ran in 2 neat columns. He could read enough to shape the bones. Somni vem. He almost laughed at the Latinized vanity of it, dream pretending not to be Greek for once. And a line about a key moved by fire but not burned, and a reference he'd know anywhere. Domvs Avrea. The Golden House, Nero's Palace, Rome. Under that, a note in a smaller, sharper hand, the kind scholars use when they are talking to themselves and not to the world. Ignis servet, non dominat. Fire serves. It does not rule. His breath shortened. The apartment felt suddenly small. On the desk across the room, a map lay open from last week's assignment. Nothing to do with dreams. Everything to do with a museum in Cairo and an insurance policy. He had meant to fold it away. He hadn't. Rome stared up at him like it had been listening. He set the papyrus on the nightstand. Something heavy knocked his wrist from the inside of his jacket. He reached into a pocket he didn't have in waking life and pulled out a coin. Bronze. Worn. A head with a jaw you could break your hand on. A wreath like a boast. Nero Caesar Aug Germ. On the reverse, a building with radiating lines that could be a sunburst or a ceiling. If you had stood under the oculus in the Domus Aurea and looked up until your neck hurt, you'd carve like that too. Along the edge, a scratch too neat to be accidental. 4 letters, IGNI, as if the rest had been scoured off by a thumb impatient with secrets. He laughed, then bit the laugh in half. He was suddenly, painfully aware of everything awake again. The radiator ticked. A siren unscrolled somewhere to his right and unrolled itself along the backs of buildings and was gone. He picked up his phone. 3:13 a.m. He called a number he shouldn't have memorized, and because he was him, of course he memorized it. It rang twice. Ulric, a voice said, sawdust and chamomile tea and not enough sleep. Dr. Hanna Varga could hold a line like a safecracker holds breath. This had better be ghostly. Rome, he said. A beat. The good kind of Rome, or the kind you wake up from and need to walk 3 miles before you can stand your own kitchen. Domus Aurea, he said. Ah, she said, the bright kind of night. I brought a page back. He looked at the papyrus again to make sure he wasn't lying. Part of the Codex. Hanna didn't say anything for a count of 5. Ulric, she said finally, you don't bring parts of a dream back for free. I know. What did you pay? He closed his eyes. He saw rain on an iron roof. He heard a boy laugh at a game, boots on a step. He reached for them and found the outline and not the flesh. A day, he said. 8 years old. My brother. A game he hated. Hanna didn't move. You could hear when a person didn't move. She was very good at that. Okay, she said. We're going to Rome. You're not my handler, he said, out of habit. Correct, she said. Handlers are for people who get handled. I am your friend who hates the word custodian on principle and who once stole a parking pass from a Vatican guard. You never proved that. Proving is for daytime. Text me the text. He took a photo of the papyrus and sent it. He sent one of the coin as well. He didn't send the watch. The watch did not enjoy being photographed. Hannah read fast. You could hear the sift and sort. Ignis servit, non dominat, she said. A lovely lie. The Golden House, your favorite emperor. Don't, he said. All right, she said. 2 days to book flights and permits we won't need. Sleep 2 more hours. Do not chase anything. Eat something salt in the morning. He looked at the neat ring on the nightstand, and the salt dried there, like thought. Hannah, he said. He was there. The custodian? I don't think he likes the definite article, U.S. said. But yes. What did he want? What he always wants, U.S. said. To keep people from being people. Hannah drank something, water, likely, and did not set the glass down. It won't be linear, she said. Rome never is. But if the Codex is pointing, we follow the point. We don't kick the arrow just because you hate who carved it. I don't hate him, U.S. said, before he could stop the sentence. I hate the way he makes loss feel tidy. Loss isn't tidy, Hannah said. That's why people build libraries. He nodded to no one and ended the call. He carried the page to the desk and set it beside the map. He laid the coin on Rome and pushed it until it clicked into place over a faded circle someone else had drawn on paper, decades earlier. The coin covered that circle like a lid. He stood there for a long time. He waited for the tremor in his hands to translate into something useful. The watch on the nightstand ticked once. He looked back at it. It never did that when he was awake. He waited, breath held like a diver. Nothing. Fine, he said to the room. Keep your jokes. He turned off the lamp. He slept without dreaming, or he dreamed without remembering. One small mercy was that he could no longer tell the difference. 2 days later, Ulric Stone stood in Rome. The city moved like a living river, scooters carving narrow streets, tourists swarming piazzas, priests gliding between churches, vendors hawking roasted chestnuts in smoky clouds. But underneath all of it, Rome still breathed the same air it had 2,000 years ago. Fire and stone, glory and ruin, always stacked in layers. Beside him, Hannah Varga adjusted her satchel. She had traded her professor's glasses for dark sunglasses, her cardigan for a leather jacket. In one hand, she held an official permit from the Ministry of Culture. In the other, a folded copy of the map they weren't supposed to have. Domus Aurea, she murmured, scanning the Colle Oppio Park above the buried palace. You realize they don't exactly hand out tours of Nero's underground playground at night. Lucky for us, U.S. said. We're not exactly tourists. The entrance was a narrow stair descending into the hill, guarded by a gate. Officially, restoration work had kept the palace off limits for decades, though guided tours had begun again in daylight. But their contact in the archives had slipped them a pass, stamped and signed by someone important enough not to be questioned. The guard barely looked at the paper. He waved them through with the bored air of a man who had seen too many archaeologists pass by with notebooks and cameras. They descended. The air cooled, heavy with damp stone and something older, smoke embedded in memory. Hannah clicked on a small lamp. The walls came alive. Frescoes stretched across vaults, winged victories, gardens in eternal bloom, ceilings painted with suns and stars. Gold leaf still winked in places, like laughter echoing too long. Welcome to Nero's dream, Hannah said. U.S. glanced at the fresco above them. The rays of the painted sun fanned in alternating lengths, 8 long, 8 short. The same pattern carved into the door in Alexandria. the same pattern etched into the coin he now kept hidden in his jacket pocket. He pulled the papyrus fragment from its protective case. Its fibers were delicate but stubborn, the ink still legible. Ignis servet, non dominat. Fire serves, it does not rule. Beneath it, a sketch of a chamber with concentric suns. Hana leaned closer. That looks like the octagonal room. They walked until the tunnel opened into a chamber unlike any other. The ceiling rose in a dome, with an oculus cut straight through the center, a perfect circle of open sky. The ancient architects had aligned it with the sun, so that light would strike different mosaics on solstices and equinoxes. Even buried under centuries, the geometry hummed with precision. But tonight, the oculus showed no sky. The hole was sealed, covered by a pale plaster that reflected their lamplight faintly. US raised the papyrus. The sun without a sky, he said quietly. Hana frowned. You're telling me your dream is overlaying itself on reality again. That's how it works, he said. He touched his watch, still frozen at 11:47. I just need the right alignment. He walked to the center of the chamber, directly beneath the oculus. The fresco suns stared down from 4 directions, their rays uneven, alternating. He held the coin against the papyrus. The scratches lined up with one of the long rays. The chamber shifted, not with tremors, nothing anyone outside would notice, but the air thickened, and the light wavered, as if reality had taken a step sideways. Hana's voice sharpened. Ulric, what did you just... Before she could finish, the lamps flickered. Then, as if someone had exhaled centuries at once, the chamber dissolved into flame. He was no longer in a tourist corridor. He was in Rome, AD 64. The city burned. The night sky was red, painted with the glow of flames leaping from rooftop to rooftop. Smoke rolled like storm clouds, choking the streets. Citizens screamed as they fled, dragging belongings through alleys, clutching children. Columns toppled, statues cracked in the heat. US staggered, covering his mouth with his sleeve. He knew this night from history. The Great Fire of Rome, 6 days of destruction, blamed on Nero, whispered about by survivors. But in this layer, it wasn't rumor or propaganda. It was raw, merciless reality. Through the chaos, a voice carried, smooth and measured. Ignis servit, non dominat. US turned. The custodian stood in the heart of the fire, untouched. Flames curled around his figure without burning. His eyes reflected the blaze like twin mirrors. You again, US muttered. The custodian inclined his head. You walk too far, Stone. You forget that memory is not meant to be lived twice. I need the Codex, US said. He glanced down an alley where fire consumed everything. It led me here for a reason. The Codex does not lead. It warns. A building collapsed in the distance. Sparks rained down like falling stars. Citizens fell to their knees in prayer, some to gods of fire, others to any god who would listen. The custodian stepped closer. Fire serves. It cooks food, forges metal, lights darkness. But here, men believe it rules. That lie destroys empires. Would you carry that lie into your world? I carry truth, US said. Truth is heavier than you think. The custodian lifted his hand. From the flames, something began to rise, an engine of bronze and stone, gears turning with molten light inside. It was no myth, no metaphor. It was a machine, pulsing like a heart. The Ignis engine, the custodian said softly. The secret they buried in stories of madness and blame. With it, fire bends. It can be eternal, controlled, pass through ages. Do you still want to take what should never be known? US stared at the machine. He could feel its heat even from here. a promise of power too precise to be accidental. He thought of the page in his pocket, of the cost already paid. The custodian's voice slid into his mind. "Give me another day, another memory. I will let you carry it home." US gritted his teeth. Not this time. He turned his watch in his hand, feeling its cold weight. He listened. Through the roar of fire, he heard it again. 3 bells, faint but steady. His chrono point. He focused. He remembered Callista's words. "When you hear the bells, look for the sun without a sky." He looked up. Through the smoke above the burning city, a hole opened, circular, pure. Not the moon, not the stars. A perfect white sun shining in darkness. He ran. The custodian's voice echoed behind him. "Stone, every truth you steal will cost you more than you know." US didn't look back. He leapt through the circle of light. He jolted awake in his apartment, gasping for air. His shirt clung with sweat. His throat burned with smoke that shouldn't exist. The watch lay in his palm, silent, hands still frozen. Beside it, on the nightstand, sat something that hadn't been there before. A fragment of bronze etched with sunrays and faint inscriptions in Latin. Part of the Ignis engine. US touched it, and a spark ran up his arm. Not heat, memory. 1,000 fires lit in human history. Torches, beacons, furnaces, bombs. Fire serving, fire ruling. He dropped it back onto the wood, breathing hard. His phone buzzed. Hannah's voice came calm, as always. "Ulric, tell me you didn't bring anything back." He looked at the bronze fragment, still pulsing faintly in the dark. "I did." A long pause. "Then Rome isn't finished with us yet." US leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He could still hear the custodian's voice. Low and patient. "Truth is heavier than you think." He closed his eyes, knowing the dreams weren't done with him. Not yet.